Hey, Kaushik, do you hear me?
Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Well,
Should we get started, Sana?
Yes, Kaushik. Let's get started.
Yeah, so again, Sana, you were not there last time. I was not there the 3 weeks before that. So both of us
Yes.
have somewhat partial view, but I would like to use this meeting to continue the R2 discussions. Again, we'll need a very focused set of maybe follow-throughs, because what I realized, at least from the last session few days ago, was, of course, there are very good but slightly different schools of thought and approach for R2. We need to agree on, hey, if R2 is really going to happen by end of this year, we've got 3 months. We really need to be super incremental and tactical with R2, and then all of the planning, especially design work for R3, should continue in parallel. But that's more that will have its own separate parallel cycle, right? So with that kind of a alignment between us, we should now really dig deeper into what is it that R2 should be, because we need to give that clarity to SIG 2 and 3.
Right. Should we share the document, Kaushik?
I can bring up the document, the one about user stories, right? R2
R2.
planning.
R2 focus, right?
Can you see it?
Yes, we can all see that.
Perfect. So I think there were lots of discussions. I don't remember where we took the notes around the summary from Monday meeting, but there was some place where we had agreed to document the 4 things that I know some of us were talking about, but I don't see those listed anywhere. So
You're saying 3 months target, Kaushik. That seems to be a new section to me. The one that you just scrolled. Keep going down.
this
This
one.
part, right? Is it the new section?
no, this is mine, I think.
No, this
I
is
thought
Okay.
that's mine. So I think Antu, she said that she was going to put, I didn't check it.
yeah.
She put
Anto, I
something in
thought
the doc.
was, yeah, I don't see anything. So, but I thought she pasted somewhere. Maybe it was in the Slack chat or something.
if you go down, there was a summary section that I had started creating as well. I don't know if it's there.
This one?
No. This is the requirements. So if you go down, all the way down, I don't know if there's a heading for the summary section.
There's nothing else that I see.
We can create a new section just to summarize what is discussed, and just to brainstorm. We can create a new section here. Conclusion, summary, however we want to call it.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going back to the Slack. So Anthu did say meeting notes edit, but I don't see them where in the document.
Maybe they are in the they are in the agenda and notes. Maybe is it there? Yes, I think she put it. She put it in this document here. Let me. I think here's where I see it. I'll put it on Slack or in the meeting. Yeah, I'll put it on the meeting then. Wait,
Yeah,
where is the chat? Here. She puts it in the agenda. There is a Word document for the agenda in SIG Network Architecture. She put it there.
I see. So, right. So prioritize stories, user stories of features currently in discussion for development and inclusion in R2. That was first. Second, identify, define, and prioritize user stories for R3, which should closer to end of R2. And within the first bucket, 2 or more NFs on the same infra, OAI, RAN plus cloud, POX. And within POX, we should some of the discussions will need to happen. Workload SDK. What does this mean? Workload, like SDK on the for workload operators, cluster operators?
Yeah, so there is so we want to develop an SDK. I think it should be Nephew SDK, I think.
Yeah. And then tech debt from SIG2.
Yeah. Now, just to be realistic, just to give you a sense of, Bala is also on the call, right? He can correct me, but or John has his hands raised. But yeah, what I want to say, maybe quick, is that if you look to the timeline, if the target date is mid-November, right? And we take 2 sprints for testing and integration, then we have 3 sprints left, which means so there is from now till mid of October. So there is really no time. Hardly any time.
Yeah, I frankly think we should punt it to like Jan end or something for R2, but again, there's too much of back and forth here on the dates.
So I think that what we had talked about was just we establish a cadence of November and May, and we just whatever lands. So that was what we talked about in the TSC. I mean, I'm flexible, like from my point of view, like whatever we decide as a community works for me, but I feel like we have to, rather than, my opinion is that would be my preference, but I'm whatever we want to do. I will say that I haven't been attending these meetings because I've been figuring that this group is that I'm this isn't where my best value is figuring out the right things to do from a end user point of view. But looking at this list, this looks way more reasonable than when I was worried. I still agree with Wim that there's almost no time to do more than like tech debt, but like B Sagar demonstrated yesterday, he's got a lot of this working, so I think that like there's very little time. We'll have to analyze it more closely. But what I was hearing or worried I was hearing was this is a lot more reasonable than what I was afraid of. So I'm pleased to see that, I guess.
And my understanding is that the POCs are optional, right? They may or may not become a part of the release too, but A and B are the main focus streams. Kaushik, correct me if I'm wrong.
What about D, son? Nephew SDK.
So everything below C are the scope of POCs, or is it part of the main focus stream?
This one?
Yes, like everything below C. Are these all POCs?
No, only C is
Not this
POCs.
one.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, E is definitely not POC, but D, what I was asking about, particularly D.
I think we need to make progress on D. We'll have something to
Yeah.
release. I don't know that we'll have it'll never be finished, right? Assuming the project is surviving, we will always be changing it. So we'll have some iteration of it.
Yeah.
I see Kaushik's comment. Like, I guess let's put that to the TSC. Honestly, I don't care if we want to change the dates. That's fine. It's just what we had talked about before. So maybe we just ask the TSC whether they want. Those are the two options. It's limited scope. You have a train. You have fixed dates. Whatever lands, or more organic, use case focused releases, which the dates are figured out based upon when we're ready to begin execution. It's as far as I'm concerned, it's a TSC decision how they want to do it. Does that make sense?
It is TSA, but maybe what I was thinking was I'm with Tal on this one, that whatever lands kind of a thing. But having said that, for R2, some things should definitely have to land, because otherwise, if everything is moving in parts, like what does R2 look like? There has to be some form factor to R2. So if we know what that is, then everything else can be moving part, like POCs can keep happening, SDK work will keep trending beyond R2, tech debt will narrow down what we need to complete. But then something, maybe whatever is on A and B, we should have a very good scope that we know will land. And if that is, let's say it needs 3 months of development work plus some packaging time and so forth, then maybe it's a proposal coming from us to TSC. Of course they should approve, or they can propose alternatives, right, as an example. But that is the lens in which I was thinking, that there has to be some content that is very rounded, other content can keep progressing iteratively.
Yeah, I think personally, I mean, sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but yeah, so I think doing OAI, both the core and the run, right? So which is basically item A and B, right? That plus some technical depth as a true, let's say, project that we have a milestone on, I think is realistic. I think in parallel, we will see some progress in the C and D probably, right? Because there are people working on it. But is it a key deliverable for R2? I would say maybe, right? But I think we should sign up for A, B, and E probably, right? As a true deliverable, and then C and D as what is it, best effort, or let's see where we get.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, Wim.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. Yeah.
Kaushik, if you are in the editing mode, can you put this in two groups, like A, B, E, and then C?
Yeah, Joseph
together?
has his hands up. Yeah, please go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the B. So I think we had a discussion with Sagar also, and we started something on the RAN already, and we demonstrated the controller part at least in the SIG 2. So that part is there. Now we're trying to create user stories for B. I just wanted to mention that, and that is work in progress. Maybe I just share the doc in the chat. Everyone can take a look at it offline or now and see if that, trying to define the scope for B.
Closed loop we will not be able to do, I think, Joseph, right?
Not closed loop. I think I've mentioned on the third slide, I think I mentioned what is the scope specifically for RAN, which is in terms of development. The closed loop is more of in the first slide. What I tried to do is like, should I share my screen? Maybe just quickly give a summary. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Because Joseph, your so your D, what you refer to D for me is B.
B. I meant B. I was saying B.
Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. So I don't have an option to share, or maybe
I think Kaushik, you have to give permissions, I think, or you have to stop sharing or something. I don't know.
I stopped. I don't know how to give permission.
Yeah, I got the permission.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're preparing this. Actually, this slide is the first slide is overall for RAN, what we think needs to be done as part of NFU. And I've just tried to put the scope for R2. So I've put it into two parallel tracks. Basically, one is for study architecture requirements, which is basically WG2, what needs to be done. And this is for the development which we are discussing now, where we focus on RAN, NF. I think we chose OAI, so we start with that. And for this item, we try to put in, so in slide 3, I just mentioned what is the current status. It's basically demo we showed earlier in SIG 2. And next immediate steps is, I think the feedback was to look at using NetView framework to deploy it. Sagar has already done it for core, so we are looking at doing it for RAN as well. So that is work in progress. So this is overall plan for R2 in terms of development stream that we were looking at. So an integrated deployment of at the end of R2, what we think we can show is OAA RAN plus OAA or pre-5GC core integrated deployment. And I will try to list down what are the user stories that would be involved. For the core deployment part, I think most of the work is done by Sagar, and he's shown a demo of his progress. So the RAN part, we have to work on these other user stories to achieve this overall deployment of OA RAN plus 4. Yeah, this is just a summary of what we thought we were discussing about it. Just put it down in the PPT.
We have lots of raised hands. I have a quick question. The OAI RAN, I was going to watch the video as well to make sure that I understand what network functions are actually a part of this OAI RAN from the ORAN.
OAI RAN, what we have taken is basically it has a full G0B monolith deployment which can be there. And I think for this R2, we are trying to use only a simulated version of the RF. So remaining all other layers are real. So later beyond R2, it can be we can plug in a hardware and it work. So
yeah,
for
they are
R2,
hardware dependent, right? That's
so the
I
RF
understand.
part. Yes.
Correct.
So the
what about the VCUs, VDUs?
Yes. So the OAI has different deployment scenarios. So we can have CUDU scenario and also a monolith G0B scenario. So we are trying to define the CRD so that multiple options are possible to deploy it. So we can deploy in the demo. Actually, we try to say, okay, deploy a split G0B, which means it deploys a CUCP, CUUP, and then a DU. Or if you say monolith G0B, you need to deploy, then it just deploys one pod with the G0B all in one. And we can simulate it with a simulated UE, and the RF is simulated for the G0B. This is the scenario that we are planning. And beyond R2, we can look at bringing in the hardware part for the RF.
So one question, Joseph, like, I mean, when you say simulated, right? I mean, this was the question I was having yesterday too. So does it implement the physical layer at all? I mean, the physical layer pipeline, the PDSCH, PB, SCH, and all the PDSCH. Although, is that at all there in that G0B implementation, or is it all abstracted out?
I think it's kind of abstracted out. but to what level of detail it is implemented when you say simulated, right? The RF simulator, they call it the RF simulator. So that detailed implementation of that, I'm not sure. I think we need to check with Sagar.
Okay, because yesterday what I understood with the explanation given was that you just need to configure it. So you just apply different configuration, then you could do probably a front hauling to any RU, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Yeah, the RF in the sense like when you're doing RF, it could be just the air interface simulation, right? The other is basically the actual 3GPP physical layer where you require an accelerator. So I'm assuming that it is still an emulation kind of thing. Right?
No, I think it would be with those USRP boards that you try to connect and then show with the RF actually. So that's what he was mentioning yesterday.
Okay. So then there is a physical layer pipeline. You actually implement the physical layer. Okay.
Yeah,
but it doesn't require an accelerator probably because the bandwidth requirements.
No, I think it might require an accelerator if it is using the actual RF when you change the configuration and deploy it, right? So it might require. So we'll have so currently the deployment is just based, pure normal VM where we deploy Nepio, right? We can deploy it. But if you're going to connect with a real RF, maybe the VM where you're deploying might require the additional resources. So that we need to check. So we were not planning that for R2. So that more details, I think Sagar should be able to give.
Because then you also have, if you're talking physical layer, you also have timing and synchronization, all the grandmaster requirements, all that, which is
correct. So all that
very much critical. Yes.
So that's what we thought. We just start with first bringing in OAI above layer 1, all the functionalities for R2, and then we can look at it beyond R2 what can be done in terms of bringing the physical layer.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Joseph. I can actually create a backlog based on this and put it in sprints.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So should the goal not be to make a call?
Yes. Integrate deployment and and end-to-end call.
So one thing I wanted to understand here, when you say OAI RAN and OAI/free 5GC core, so are you planning to do the integration with both OAI and free 5GC core or one of them?
At least to start with this one OAI RAN and OAI core, but I think based on we'll have to see how much effort is required. I did check with Sagar. He said it should be okay. It should work. Yesterday also we discussed in the call, right? In the SIG automation call, we had a discussion during his demo. So he said it should work. But yeah, we'll have to try it out.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. Basically, that's a stretch goal. The last one.
I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but otherwise also, I think everybody else can comment on these. If there's something missing, then we can.
Do we need to do a change like we did, like capacity change, or is there something that we need to do, or we focus? I'm happy without it. I'm just.
Yeah, maybe that can be a stretch goal. So if all of this is done, then we can look at the capacity part, like how you have done for free 5GC. I think for the RAN also we could, but we'll have to evaluate those with the OAI by changing the CPU limits and see how much capacity it supports. We'll have to do some trial probably and check before we load it.
Yeah, that's great, Joseph.
Okay, so yeah, I think we can further give comments. I think on this document, let's chat with everyone, right? So we can look at it offline probably in the next meeting. SIG automation, we might start making the CRD and see if it's different from how if we can really reuse what is there for the other 4 components. If anything additional is required for RAN, we can look at it and discuss. So we will start with this.
If you look at timing, Joseph, the sooner you have your CRDs, the better it will be, I think, because that's where it starts from. So
correct.
Given that we have
highest priority, I think by maybe by next automation next week, we should start discussing this.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
I think all of this makes sense. I assume when you say OAI RAN CRDs, these are RAN CRDs, right? That will be used for building operators specific to OAI. The CRs themselves should not be OAI specific.
Yeah, right. So it will be just RAN CRDs, but right. It's not specific to OAI, but I think we will start with the parameters that at least OAI supports for now. But going forward, like you mentioned in this parallel threads, right, where we'll define for a real RAN as well in parallel, and then after R2, we can start using those new CRDs that are getting defined by this WG2 study, right, and then start using it for OAI. That was the plan. But right now, since we don't have this, we start with something we think can work with OAI and start from there.
But what we should do, in my view, which is actually a technical depth item, right, is that, as you maybe some people recall, is what we did is we deployed like a base framework and we have some nephew CRDs, but there's a bunch of parameters that we are not controlling through a CRD, which are, I call them vendor specific, but they could also be something else, right? So this is in the same vein. So in my view, we should try to, and this is, in my view, a technical depth thing, but would be very beneficial here once we start to do both free 5GC as well as OAI, which probably need their own parameters, right? So we should try to build in the R2 architecture the ability that we can have vendor-specific or parameters in it, which are not. Nephew provides a framework to be able to add them, but Nephew doesn't necessarily do much with it, right? It's the end application, the vendor, or in this case, or OAI, and free 5GC, you will have to interpret them at the latest stage. So, but we should build in that capability in the framework such that we don't have these issues with all of these different parameters from various vendors and what have you. And that would help a lot or enhance the architecture a lot in general.
Right. I think, I think that was discussed as well in the previous demo.
Maybe we should make an explicit note in your slide 4 about it, that we capture it somewhere, right? Define run CRD plus allow for vendor extension.
Another thing is the current NF deployment is very generic. So as long as it's like IP related, you should be able to use it. And so you can build another RAN specific CRD on top of that, and then bundle that into like your CU or GNOB or DU deployment. Yeah, so that would allow you to leverage a lot of the NF deployment stuff that we already done. So that would be ideal.
Correct. Agree.
Right. I think we will start discussing this in the upcoming meetings. We will in more detail.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Also, one more thing I wanted to check actually, since we are working along with Sagar in coordination. So, how in terms of code, right? So in case we develop the controller, so where do we put the controller code so that from OAI Sagar can review it? And is it possible in Nephew project? How is that?
Yeah, it should be a Nephew project, right? So it should be a Nephew project.
Okay.
But my suggestion is, because you do a PR, but my suggestion would be is, okay, start with the CRDs and stuff like that, and we have to put a framework in place on how it fits together, right? I think.
Right.
And then
the first two topics is what is the important, I think.
Yeah. So let's do that ASAP, and then it's a matter of putting the right pieces together, right, to make it happen. Yeah.
So the the CRDs and things would go in the Nephew API repository, and then like we have a free 5GC repository, maybe we want an OAI repository since it's going to be part of our release. Like we had this discussion about a separate experimental GitHub organization, but I think if this is part of our release, we're considering it part of our release, it should be in the Nephew project.
Yeah, okay. One more comment I have is like,
I would encourage it, but it's not mandated. If you want to, if OAI wants to put it on OAI's repo, that should be fine.
One comment I have is, instead of calling it as RAN CRDs, it's better to, I think you have two variants, right? One is a monolithic versus the disaggregated. So it's better to call it gnode B/disaggregated, where you have the C, CP, UP, and DU. I think the CRDs, you will have to handle the CRDs entirely different if you are doing disaggregated versus monolithic kind of implementations. I'm not sure if you made a decision on
yeah, I think that we'll have to see.
Ravi, maybe yes, maybe no, because we can also do it in a way that the package it defines it, right? So we should. So if we can avoid it, we should avoid it to make too much specific stuff, in my view.
Yeah, no, because when you're disaggregated, you can actually plan. The idea is that you could centralize the CCP, CUP. DU is normally distributed, so you have different topologies that you can handle. So then, your orchestration has to take all that into account.
Yes, but the topology doesn't necessarily have to be reflected in a CRD, right? It can be a package, huh?
Yeah.
Right. So we were thinking. Yeah, I think ongoing. I think we should have a broader discussion on this. I think
that's why for me this is important. This is an important topic in my view that we should discuss ASAP, because I'm not saying you cannot that you cannot put a CRD, but I'm always trying to avoid it, Ravi. That's why I'm taking the opposite opinion. But I'm not saying that who is right or wrong. I'm just trying to say there is a completely different way of doing it. Because if you look what we did with the current CRDs, right? I'm onboarding like a BNG application. It has nothing to do with 5G, but I can reuse whatever we did, right? Which is perfect, right? So, and that's what we want to achieve, I think, in Nephew, not to do too much specific stuff, because and if we have to do specific stuff, we'll have to do it. But in my view, we should try to make it as generic as we can and reuse those components rather than doing too much specific stuff. But that's, I'm not saying that we can, but if we could, we should.
Well, I think that's that idea of expressing sort of requirements of the network functions in terms of that aren't specific to the function, but are in terms of like IP claims and VLAN claims, and I don't know what other kind of claims.
Interfaces. We have interfaces. We have networks. We can have. We have building blocks which you can use in various forms. Yeah, correct.
It's that boundary between the function and the infrastructure. Yeah.
I was also thinking from the cluster requirements itself, right? I mean, you have requirements like real-time modes. I mean, if you go into real production scenarios, accelerator requirements, and then with CU, CPU, you may have relaxed. But I don't know. As long as all these cases are considered, I think you're okay. That's what I.
But we have to build those in. So at the moment, we did not do that, but we have to build those in, right? And we ignored that for the core somehow, because you also have it there. But we kind of ignored that side. So yeah, let's discuss it. So for me, I think it's important to flush this out.
Yeah. And I think Ravi, I think in terms of, you mentioned the more detailed CRDs, right? I think we should start discussing in the WG2 probably on this more generic and more parameters that needs to be included for RAN. For R2, scope is limited. So basically here it might be simpler, might be reusing most of the diff CRDs defined for core right now. But I think we should parallelly start this track. And so that beyond R2, we can then start using that into the for OAI or for any other brand.
Sure.
That study has to happen, I think. Okay. Any other raise hand or any questions?
No. You are the raised hand.
Oh, okay. Okay, I can't see that. Okay. Okay.
So I had a raised hand earlier, but it was for a different topic. So if Kaushik, if you can display that document again, actually I had a question on A, and if this is something that I just need to RTFM, I can do that. But A, if I recall, was something about multiple network functions on the same infra. I wanted to understand what specifically, because we could already do that. So what is it specifically we're talking about there? Is that like, is this dependency management between packages and functions, or is this, what is the new scope there that's not just deploy two things? For A.
I think Kaushik, what? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I thought this was two or more NF vendors on the same infra is what we had talked about, not NFs.
Ah.
Yeah.
Multi-vendor.
I think
Okay.
That's also my understanding. It's two vendors, so they wanted to see what it would mean. And I think this goes back to the point I was making earlier to make this vendor specific extension capability inside of the framework.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So vendor is one thing, and then I would love to see us try to put two UPFs up.
Sure.
And all connected, both of them can work. Yeah, that would be another one.
Okay.
On the same cluster, you mean, or generally?
Well, certainly, if we can do the same cluster, that would also be cool. So that would be a natural UPF instance as a scale up, a scale out, which we know didn't happen on R1. But then if topologically we have two UPFs connected, or we even have an IUPF proxy them, that's something that we may or may not be able, the CLD may not be able to clearly express today.
So just to understand, two or more enough vendors on the same infra. I'm trying to get my head around it. It's like two, for example, two different core functions that belong.
If OAI and 3.5GC have different requirements, for argument's sake, I don't know for sure because I don't know anything about OAI. But for instance, if they don't need GTP kernel module, or for whatever reasons they don't need Multis, then is our infrastructure, not infrastructure, is Nephew able to do the preparations correctly? Because we don't do that today. Those things are those things are Ansible installed from get-go. So all the clusters, all the nodes get those things today.
Yeah,
but then if we introduce a second one and it's say, oh, I don't need any of those, so it's harmless. If you don't need it, we can still install it. But then obviously for a better automation platform, we should be able to take the NF requirements and do the infrastructure initialization at that moment. So that would be a good thing to do. I'm not saying we have to, but then it's something I think to do.
So Stephen, it sounds like what you're saying is, I'm sorry, Bala, just so I can make sure I understand. This gets back to how we characterize and advertise and discover the capabilities of the underlying cluster / nodes. So it gets back to this a bit deeper. We had a super rough, or almost non-existent model for the infrastructure, right?
Correct.
In R1, and so we can. It's the same thing that I think Ravi was saying. Like, we don't, if there's accelerators needed, we don't have anything about that.
Yeah.
Like, we do want to make a richer model of the infrastructure and a richer model of the way that the network functions.
That's right. So in essence, in one line, the network functions today have no input to infrastructure needs.
Right.
Every time we have that, we just do that from the get-go because we only support one. So 3.5GC, that's fine. We know it's 3.5GC.
Yeah, we
then the moment we know, the moment we don't know if it's the 3.5GC or someone else, then I think we should revisit those.
Okay. Okay, that's actually pretty big, but it's something we can.
Yeah, no, I mean, take some baby steps.
Take some steps.
We have to start, and which is basically what Bernard is after, right, with the CIQ and stuff like that. So we had a discussion on that to make more, yeah. So that's we have to start this discussion as well, in my view, because if we don't do it, we will never do it.
Yes, that's right. Okay. I mean, we just keep on hacking around. Yes.
Now I know what it is.
Yeah, so I think this document is somewhat mixing kind of user stories versus themes. So the first one, this one, for example, it's NF vendors. When we say it is literally defining a common deploy CR for OAI core and free 5GC, right? As an example. And for OAI RAN, there'll be a separate set of CRs. We don't have a second vendor for RAN in R2, but moving forward, we should, right? I think that is literally, that is how I'm looking at A. Is a common set of deploy CRs for those two cores.
So I think there is two things in A in my view. One is what I call the vendor or the extendability of the packages to make it vendor specific, or so maybe we should call it out. Otherwise, we will forget about it probably. Are you editing the document maybe? So it's the vendor extensibility, if you will, right? And then the second is the infra, making the NF to infra more verbose, right? Is that the NF has more?
Yeah, more input to the infra.
More inputs, yeah. So it's for me what I call the network function to infra. There needs to be more. How should we say it? More. Yeah.
Formal.
Yeah. More input from the NF that we take into account to prepare the infra, right? So this is what I call the dynamic infra provisioning or whatever. Yes. That's a big topic, by the way.
Yes, that is. It's one of the major goals of Nethio, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I put it as three things though, Wim, right? One is common CR,
it's okay.
which
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Right, and then vendor extensibility, and then enhancement of the infra CRs to meet comply with the needs of the NF related infra provisioning.
Correct. Yes.
I will work this out as in if we agree on A, B, and C will need help from SIG 2 in terms of whatever it is that is highest priority. How do we slice it for R2?
Yeah, we have some chart, we have some input there which we can share, right? There are certain things that you probably don't care about as well. So we can share the list on.
So for B, do we almost take whatever was in the presentation except for the free 5GC OAI interop? That may be a stretch goal, but other things in that, do we copy paste those as the key user stories?
I think it's a good, let's do that as a start.
Yeah, can you paste me the link to that deck, Joseph? I will. Okay, I see. It's in the chat group. Never mind. I get it.
Yeah.
Because it's probably best to have one document where everything is captured for R2, right? And we have a single place, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to move this from the agenda section to the R2 planning at the top. Everything else can flow into appendix in terms of planning, whatever scratchpad. And then these will be the three things we'll call out. So two NF vendors, that's more of a theme, but these are the deliverables. For ORAN, we'll pick it up from that slide deck, except for that stretch goal. And for tech debt, I would request you folks on SIG to contribute in terms of whatever you think is reasonable. That's the main deliverable rounded outcome for R2. And then other things, POCs, these will be iterative. STK will be iterative. And then a lot of this work we need to do. This is more like a design completion work, but more forward looking for implementation in R3. Maybe some experimentation also for 2, but it's not yet clear what experimentation, at least not clear to me. So we can leave it as more design completion as the activity scope for this year, and then implementation is more R3.
So number 2, I worry that we won't get to anything in number 2 unless we have people who's like, those of us focused on R2 are going to probably not have any time to think about this big number.
Correct. Yeah, I think this is especially like, I don't know what this is. This should be scratched off because this is part of number 1. But all the APIs, overall architecture, for example, and so forth, those are all mostly SIG1 led. Of course, people from other SIGs should contribute, but I'm expecting SIG1 to really help drive the shape of it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because what we have to do for R3, right, is that we should, we have to start now on R3, basically. Yes. And for me, that's a lesson learned, because if we will finish, so there will be certain people who will be heads down to R2 probably, right, potentially. But that means that if they stop, you almost have to have the inputs for them to continue. Otherwise, you will stop the train, right?
Yeah. So does the plan, the scope as I described just now, does it seem reasonable? I'll call it out. I'll tag all of you folks, or rather I'll share it with the entire SIG1 so each of us can take a look. But for now on this call, I just wondered if there's any difference of opinion, if you need to move things around, let me know, because our next meeting is a few days out. So let's try to lock it in if we can today.
Hey, Kaushik, Subhash here.
Yeah.
Actually, I would like to ask in the context of policy. Is it possible that we have the user story created in R2, and let's say in R2, we are able to give some fruitful stuff, and we'll able to get included here in R2, and also successively we progress in the R3. So just wanted to make a user story so that we can track it, and also people get the motivation to work on it.
Yeah. So good point, Subhash. Right. Look, all of the POC work, Helm, policy, including probably even Nephew SDK. Like, I'll leave it to each of the leads defined here to really make progress on the user stories and scope. This is expected to be iterative. So as you make progress, you help define the scope. That this may not have a very good landing by the R2 timeline, but that's okay. That's the nature of the POC work. So the work should start to the point there. We are all incentivizing the POCs, right? But what we're saying, or rather the demarcation that I was trying to do was, there's some very clear delivery pattern for R2, which was the OAI work and so forth. And then other things are important. They'll keep progressing, but they may not have a well-defined landing, or rather the landings may keep happening even beyond R2. And that's just the nature of those POCs. So we should just, I'll frame it appropriately, but please rest assured, policy is important. You should take the lead and drive through the POC.
Yeah, actually, in the policy document also I identified like enhancing the security. For example, some containers should not be run as a root user. So those kind of policies we can fit in R2 itself. So maybe we'll try to deliver in R2 those policies as a part of the main repository. So those things actually.
Yeah, I think as we get deeper into these POCs and other tracks, we will enhance the R2 delivery based on the status and the progress on the POCs. So it's great if you have very good line of sight on certain completion milestones for policy. For now, I'll keep it somewhat empty for those sections in terms of R2 deliverables. As we make progress, we can outline those.
Thank you.
Cool. Anyone else? Any other inputs?
I'll just say quickly, like from my perspective, SIG2 perspective, like this looks pretty good. I think that, as we lay it out into the sprints and see what the actual deliverables are, we'll know better. But it seems reasonable to me, or doable. I'm sure it won't be easy. but yeah, I think this looks, the general shape of it looks good.
I'll add what I always add: the devil's in the details. Once we start building the actual stories, then SIG2 will be able to turn them into an actual plan, and then we can see what will fit within the R2 timeline. Of course, maybe fit, right? We can't make commitments, and yeah, then I will be able to have some sort of shape of what the expectations are for R2. And I assume that some of these POCs will be partial, and here's another thing. We could think per release to mark certain features as experimental. Many projects, open source projects and otherwise do this, right? They say, hey, we're including this feature, but it's, we mark it as a work in progress in some way. So to kind of set expectations for users of R2.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. Yeah, we had to see what exactly fits in, especially the one concern I have is I'm glad Kaushik has laid out in this way between the actual deliverable versus the POCs. And POC coming mainstream, for example, if that's where we need to define. For example, at this point of time, we are inclining that all the POCs will go to a different repo. If they are going to be part of Nephew, then obviously they need to come to the main repo. We have not defined that's at, and obviously it has to follow certain things. So that's one concerning thing for me, especially considering if R2 goes as per our original schedule, which is mid-November. Like we mentioned, we have 3 sprints for development and 2 sprints for integration and hardening. So we need to exactly figure out what we can do in those 3 sprints if the dates don't change. So I think that's probably we'll figure out once we have all the user stories and sprints laid out. So I'm just detailing out what Tal and John already said.
Yeah, so what I'll do, fully understand, and Tal, your point is extremely well understood as well. What I'll do is I will, like I said, give me in 24 hours, I'll put this in the main R2 planning doc with the slightly more detailing. It may not be fully defined user stories, but at least as we agreed here, it should come across cleanly. We can then maybe some of some of the SIG1 members can help clearly define the user stories as SIG2 would like to see them based on that. But at least for tomorrow, by end of day tomorrow, I want each of us to review that section in the R2 planning doc. So we at least have a high level alignment. The detailing can then follow through. And then I want to come into the next SIG1 meeting with ideally maybe a little bit of a draft of the user stories based on these bullets.
The one that needs a bit, if you look to the infra to NF, right?
Yeah.
What do we want to target there? Because this is a big topic, right? Do we have an idea of a sense of what? I think Bernard I didn't discuss yet with him. I was going to do that tomorrow, hopefully. The question is, because depending what the user story is there, it might be possible or not possible. That's why I'm highlighting.
I think we should probably pick a couple of things that we know from our current NFs. So like require this kernel module, right? And then if there's if there's some accelerator requirement or some hardware specific device requirement, that might be something. Like I think it should be limited to demonstrating with no more than say 3 different requirements, just so that we can figure out the machinery without getting into all the detail. And once the machinery is there in R3, we can refine it because it'll be wrong, and then we can expand it.
Yeah. Probably it's why from my perspective, it would be good to, let's say, at least list the elements we want to, we would like to take into account, like kernel modules, probably NUMA placement is one that I'm thinking of.
SRIOV, can the node support SRIOV? Can it's like that's what those extend our interfaces piece that we already have, right? DPDK.
Yeah, that we have.
Most of those we need to mock. We don't have the test bed to do those.
Okay,
but then
let's look at what
yeah.
OAI and Free5GC actually demand, maybe too, and also let that drive it a little bit.
But then there is several aspects, I think, John, to this, right? One is to understand what requirements are. Then the question is, what do you do with it? You could first say you just discover, right? Basically, what we kind of did a mock of it. The second is you try to influence, right? Which is yet another domain, right? So that's why I'm saying is maybe it would be
node, you reprovision the cluster.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, correct. So then so we should probably highlight all of these aspects to make it clear what do we target for R2 and what we probably need to target for later releases. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, hey, Wim, maybe I was looking at it this way, right? Which is if, let's say, the user story is, or user journey is deployment, right? And because we are picking up OAI and existing Free5GC, for the infra part, the infra CR should support provisioning of the infrastructure resources as needed for both these NFs, right? And then between these two NFs, if there are common things, how do you then have that pattern established through the CR and the implementation so that same implementation serves both the NFs? That is all I think will come from the requirements, right? Or rather from the user stories. Everything else is design, detailing, and so forth that you need to do. Or rather, what I mean is conversely, the user stories are not going to say kernel modules in SRIA. That's a little bit too detailed. I think we'll just keep it at the level of these are the NFs, and all of the enhancements for infra CR should happen through the, as part of the implementation.
I think though there is
yes.
So my concern there, Kaushik, just to raise it, I think it's similar to what Wim just said, is that discovery and matching are different than actuation. So like, whose responsibility is it to, like, let's say we have a cluster package that defines a cluster. Do we want to look at the NF requirements and have an automation that tweaks the cluster package to enable certain functionality and then spins it up? That requires that the actuation mechanism, which right now is CAPI, that creates the cluster, provides some hooks for us to do that, or we have to build an operator that does it. So like it could be, the scope could grow dramatically. So we have to, I think we have to like kind of piece it apart. Maybe that doesn't matter in the user stories, but I guess I'm just trying to say, I don't want to commit to saying that the user story says we can do this. And then that means that we must be able to provision clusters and install a kernel module. Maybe there's an ecosystem project that can do that for us. I think Red Hat maybe has something like that. I don't know, but it's a question. It's a big question mark right now for me.
Yeah, and so, I'm with you. What all I meant was the user stories are going to be higher level, that they are not going to dictate a specific implementation. So SIG2 should then for R2 choose a scope that is realistic, right, or reasonable.
Okay.
And I think we should just have that alignment, maybe as part of the handshake, as you come into the implementation plan, as Tal was saying, like you provide that visibility to SIG1. If there are any discrepancies or misalignments, we can sort it out, right, along the way.
Great, perfect.
Yeah, I saw, I think Varadarajan, yes, I think now that let's first get to the R2 finalization, scope finalization in the next, whatever, X days, we've been somewhat, it's been an iterative and a process that has taken us longer than what I would have thought. But regardless, once we lock it in, we then for the POCs should start working group 2 and 3 as separate working groups. And then working group 1 will be the design related activities of R2. So each of those will then end up being some isolated or separate sets of meetings. So I will trigger that with Sana once we close on the R2 scope. Cool. We are at time. Was there anything else? I will clean up the document. I'll move everything to the R2 planning doc with the right summary in the next 24 hours. Thank you, everyone. This was a great meeting to help close on the R2, at least somewhat close on the R2 scoping. I'm hoping it doesn't derail too much from where we are.
No, it definitely moves us forward.
on the side note, Kaushik and Sana, I think probably this is a totally different topic. We should fix the calendar. I think we owe it to the community. I think we communicated. I think if I can be of any help, let me know. Probably we can work with our new Linux Foundation representative. I think network architecture meetings have been a bit confusing, not only for me and many of us.
No, thank you, Bala, for raising this. Actually, I was hoping to get to it. It's just for me, I'm in India, and so getting the time slotting with the Elephant team to get that sorted has been a little bit tricky. If you could, since you offered to help, if you could just help us do that, that'll be fantastic.
Yeah, just if you can tell me what days the actual meetings and the meeting links are, then I will work with Kenny on that.
Sounds good. I'll ping you offline on those.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I will follow up, and let's meet in a few days from now.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaushik.
Thank you, Kaushik. I know it's late for you. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks
so much. All good. Thank you.
Yeah. Take it.